right. Well, welcome everyone to the first ever live episode of Industry Uncovered. For anyone unfamiliar, Industry Uncovered is a Charles Aris podcast series where we speak with experts from across the agribusiness sector on interesting trends and emerging technologies. As we've grown this podcast, we started to get more familiar with our partners at InterSearch Worldwide and all the great things their agriculture practice has been up to. So we wanted to host this discussion as a touch point for what's happening in the agriculture industry globally. I'm Kacey, for anyone I haven't met yet, and I serve in the Charles Aris agriculture practice alongside Eric Spell and Micah Wells. Micah and I will serve as the moderators for this discussion, so please feel free to add any questions you may have in the chat, and we will answer as time allows.
Good day. Yes, thank you, Kacey. We will do our best to monitor chat with questions that come through. But first, we want to thank every one of our panelists for being here today. Also, I'm sure everyone here could talk about ag and ag tech all day, and that'd be awesome. But we're really going to break this discussion into two main topic areas. The first being the current state of agriculture investing, and also the emergent talent trends that are affecting hiring leaders around the world. So we'll discuss each of these topics within about 15-minute segments if we can keep it contained. And then we'll end today's webinar by sharing some of the most exciting ag tech developments that each of us are seeing in our respective fields. But before we dive in, it'd be great for everyone to introduce themselves by sharing their name, the country they're in, position, title, etc. I'll call on you guys as I see you on the screen, and we'll run around like that. And Eric, since you're top right of me for the secret square, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. Thank you, Micah. I'm Eric Spell. I reside in North Carolina, which is along the east coast of the United States. I've been in agriculture my entire career. I grew up on a farm in eastern North Carolina. After university, I started my career in the swine industry, where I spent 10 years with what is now a division of Smithfield Foods. And a lot of those years were in talent acquisition. So I've been in talent acquisition for over 30 years. And I serve as the leader of our agriculture practice at Charles Aris Executive Search.
Thank you, Eric. Now we'll jump across the pond to Micheal. Take it away, good sir.
Thanks. Thank you, Micah. So my name is Micheal Coughlan. I'm located in Ireland. I grew up on a mixed dairy and beef farm. I've worked in the recruitment industry for the last 25 years, predominantly focusing on leadership and management appointments. And one of the industry sectors that I focused on is in the agriculture and food sector. And within InterSearch Worldwide, I lead the agriculture and food practice group, supporting clients on a global basis and leading our consultants and research team within the InterSearch network.
Thank you. Next, we'll jump over to Laura.
Hi there, I'm Laura Rosso. I'm based in São Paulo, Brazil, which is in the southeastern region of the country. I have not lived in, grew up on a farm, but I have been working with agribusiness in the past 7 years, primarily with commodities and financial credit, working both in executive search and leadership projects. So that's it for me.
Okay. Claire, if you will.
Hello, my name is Claire Lelem. I'm based in Paris, France. I have been working at Grant Alexander, a headhunting company, member of the InterSearch network, for 2.5 years. I create the biotechnology and bioindustry practice within the company. I have been working in the executive search industry for about 25 years. Initially, I have a scientific background, a PhD in organic chemistry, and some experience in research and development in pharmaceutical industry. For several years now, I have been working for companies that transform plant-based raw material into ingredients for various applications, for example, in cosmetics, chemicals, food, feed, materials, energy, and so on.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you. Now we'll zoom clear across down under to Peter.
Thank you very much. Peter Wade from Australia. I live in Melbourne down south. I've been on farming activities for over, 50 plus years. And I do a lot of work with large corporates in terms of international companies buying Australian companies, whether it's dairy or cattle or sheep, but also dealing with a lot of large private companies in the ag sector as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And finishing up strong, Monty.
Hi, thank you very much, Peter. You're looking very active. You must be quite late up there in Australia. Well, it's not too bad here in India. It's 6:30 p.m. Thank you very much, Micah, for organizing this entire exercise. It's so enriching. I am Srimanto Bhattacharya. I am based out of Bangalore in India. I have been a part of executive search industry for like now 25 plus years. Essentially, I lead the entire practice within India and Asia Pacific, and specific focus on impact sector, financial inclusion, bottom of the pyramid, and agriculture. So this is a new formed group which Micheal heads globally for us in agriculture. And we do a lot of work in the agri space within InterSearch. So that's it. We'll look forward to having a good time here.
Couldn't say any better. Absolutely. What an amazing panel representing all parts of the world. This is truly exciting for us to be involved in kicking off, and we're so excited to kick this day off today. So as we mentioned earlier, first topic is going to be, sustainability and ag tech. And so I'll kick out the first question and maybe call on somebody to kick off that conversation. And then if you feel like jumping in afterwards, feel free. And obviously, if we get to run along, maybe I'll give you a hand signal, or we'll just know when it's time to move ahead. So first question we have today is, what are the notable advancements and developments in ag tech within your specific region? And I'm really curious, Micheal, in Ireland, what do you have to say on this topic?
Thank you, Micah. So I would say the most noticeable advancement in ag tech from a European and maybe from an Irish context really has been the introduction of technology and the application of technology in agriculture. It has been really phenomenal in the last short number of years, maybe the last 10 years or so. If we take such things as robotics, particularly the application of robotics in milking in the dairy industry, so moving away from very labor-intensive work of milking in a dairy industry to the application of robotics. If we take the application of satellite navigation, particularly in the crop industry, for the application of fertilizers, etc., the application of seeds, etc., has been becoming quite influential in the crop industry. If we take, for example, low slurry emissions, which is associated with ammonia and application of slurry onto the farm level, much significant applications. But for me, maybe the most fundamental has been the simple app on the mobile phone or the cellular phone. The volume of information that is now coming to the farmer via his or her phone is really, truly game-changing. The data, whether it's around grass growth in their farm, whether it's around breeding at the farm level, whether it's around the volume of milk and the quality of that milk based on protein content, fat levels, etc. So the information that's coming to the farmer and at the agriculture level, for me, is the real big change that's been happening in agriculture in a European level over the last number of years.
I think it's interesting. Everybody's an expert weatherman now. It's going to rain at 1:05 p.m. So that's totally changed how we think about and do business. Anybody else want to jump in on that topic real quick?
Micah, I'll jump in. It's been really interesting to see with everybody focusing on the sustainability of agriculture and its role going forward. There's been an emphasis on lowering the carbon footprint, and with that, the increased adoption and development and I guess better economy related to biologicals and in the crop protection space. In prior years, there were a few companies developing biological products, but now there's more of them, and so the economics is a little bit more favorable for the farmer, the end user, to adopt the biologicals. It's been growing at the rate of 15% per year in the last 3 years, whereas traditional crop protection products they're still control the market in terms of what the farmer uses, but it's growing at a much lower rate at 5% compared to 15% with biologicals. And I know our team has done a number of searches for several crop protection companies that are bringing biologicals to the marketplace, and those have been fun searches to do.
If I may step in Australia, we're finding that, pardon me, GPS-guided equipment such as drones or satellite imagery is really helping to enhance crop management and yield optimization, as well as using IoT and sensor technology to look at crop conditions and livestock health, leading to data-driven decisions. And the other area is for automation and robotics. Planting, weeding and harvesting will actually decrease labour costs and increase the efficiency and the yields that we're getting.
If I could just add on the perspective in Brazil, it's everything that everybody said as well. So it's interesting because we see the global trends, they're just everywhere. And I think that here specifically, we have a big focus on startups. And you know, we have these innovation centers spread out through the country, and they're growing. So today they're more focused in the southern eastern region in the state of São Paulo. But we see that there's stuff in the Northeast, which is a very underutilized region with respect to agriculture, and a lot of growing also in the center west of the country.
Yeah, it's pretty similar here in India also. I agree, you know, I think, you know, what Eric and Micheal mentioned, the accuracy of the data, and Micah, you also mentioned about that the farmer gets real-time information and data. So it's all about how these startups have been able to, I would say, you know, really, you know, create a lot of innovation. So even in India, we've seen, you know, India typically over the years have been a very agrarian economy, you know, but today, you know, there is so much of innovation. What Micheal mentioned about satellite navigation, Peter, my colleague, mentioned about IoT and sensors. So there is a drip irrigation, there is a lot of authentic and accuracy of a lot of data analytics which goes into it. Agriculture itself as a academic subject has undergone a change. So because at that level at a university level, when we do agriculture, obviously, you know, things will improve and things are on the better side as well, from India as well.
I think that's an interesting point, and I think seeing how all these techs and startups are coming together, shifting maybe the labor, et cetera, how do you think this is impacting talent acquisition as well? Laura, any thoughts on that?
So yeah, so I think what's happening, and I think it's a general trend as we as colleagues, you know, we tend to talk about this, is that well, for one, after the pandemic, we had an initial trend where people didn't want to move to more remote locations, which is the case for agricultural, for the agricultural market, especially because of the families. Like families did not want to move anymore, so they were very accustomed to being able to stay stable because there's a lot of, you know, changing locations and things like that. That has reduced itself recently. And of course, there is a search for people with more of a sustainability look as well in the profiles, because this is an increasing trend, you know, as we mentioned before. So I would say that these are the main things. And, you know, there's a lot of, with respect to like competency that we look at it for resilience, the agricultural market, especially here in Brazil, which is very commodities focused. So, you know, we have soy, we have corn, cotton, coffee. And so these are all, you know, the pricing is all commanded by the London Stock Exchange. And so this requires a lot of, you know, stomach, as we say here in Brazil, to go with the ups and downs, with the impact of all the global events that we've been having, with the wars that have been going on over in Europe. They impact us all directly. So,
and Micah, I would add that one of the things that's happening as it relates to the recruitment side of things, traditionally, at least here in the United States, and I think this applies globally, we tended to recruit people that grew up on farms, or restrict ourselves to people growing up on farms or having an ag background. Well, we can't do that now because the number of people that come from a farming background is a relatively small pool of people. And this impact on the environment and the impact on meeting the growing demand for food with a growing population. I mean, it's allowing really smart and bright people who want to be a part of that don't have a background to be in positions of sustainability or around impact and lowering the carbon footprint. And that's exciting because sometimes we as agriculturalists, we get a little too proud of the fact that we grew up on a farm, and that's all in good, but there's people that want to be a part of this journey that don't have that background, that are very smart and can contribute. They've got a STEM background, as science, technology, engineering, and math interest, and there's a lot of opportunity for people with that interest and background.
So Mike,
So you had something? Good.
yeah, just to build upon what Eric just mentioned, because I can definitely see the trends in Europe in that area. If we take traditionally, maybe 2 generations ago, agriculture was very much an operator-led industry. So it was less educated. It was very much depending on hard labor to achieve the results. If we look at the agriculture industry of today, certainly in a European context, we don't have the volume of operators to run the farms. So there's a labor shortage at a manual level. And if we look at how technology is impacting at farm level, one area I notice is the education requirements within agriculture has significantly increased. Particularly around the application of the technology and operating technologies, etc. And my experience is that the people now working in agriculture are degree qualified, as Eric outlined. They may no longer just have degrees in agriculture or ag science. They could be in engineering, they could be in science. But the education levels within agriculture has really increased over the last 1 decade, I would say. And the other observation I find is that people working in agriculture are now more involved in continuous learning. So they're constantly returning back to maybe do short courses, continuing to improve their knowledge, whether it's around sustainability, around carbon, around application of the IoT in their area, or how to use the technology via their mobile phones and their apps, etc. So very much continuous learning is now really happening within agriculture among the people working in the industry.
Danny.
If I may, sorry, our experience in Australia is, of course, a large number of corporates, whether it's Canadian pension funds or US companies or Chinese companies buying up larger parcels of land, and they do need good people to run their organisations, and ideally they would like someone who understands the Australian market and conditions. We're also seeing with family businesses and family farms, traditionally, normally one family member as a child would become an adult and then run the family farm. But we're now seeing that since the pandemic, that more and more people want to go back into the remote locations because of the restrictions that we've all had with the pandemic. And I think we're seeing an uptick of people wanting to go back to the land, whether it's their own family businesses or other farms, to get more experience. So I think the war for talent is always on, of course, but we're just seeing that there's more interest, and particularly from the younger folk coming through, that they're getting more education, not just in agriculture, but whether it's banking or having some years away before coming back to the farm. So we're seeing some good results in that respect.
Danny, I think that leads well into our next question too, about identifying some of the key trends shaping the global landscape of ag tech investment that we've been seeing. Claire, would you care to kick off this conversation?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I would like to start with some historical context. For example, for thousands of years, agriculture stayed mostly the same. And in the last 100 years, Machines started helping, but the methods stayed old-fashioned. Intensifying agriculture to get higher yields using mechanical and chemical methods has hurt on the environment. Heavy use of chemicals have damaged the soil. Farmers have reacted in two ways. The first one, going all organic with 100% natural methods, but this greatly reduces yields. It benefits neither farmers nor consumers, making products expensive and only accessible to the wealthy. The second way, embracing technological progress in the last decade, leading to regenerative agriculture. This approach balances protecting nature with increasing productivity, allowing us to feed the planet without deforestation and ensuring good working conditions for farmers and respect for animals. Technology has driven this change. Agronomists work on soil, plants, and animals, aiming to protect land, water, and biodiversity. Major innovations are being made to avoid soil damage and maintain its balance. One major challenge is a carbon footprint. By minimally disturbing the soil, we can restore its microbiota and enable it to absorb CO2. Traditional plowing tools are becoming obsolete. Research is advancing in organic fertilizers and pesticides using pheromones, fungi, and bacteria, for example. New tools like drones, robots, and AI are being used to apply these products efficiently, even leaf by leaf. Micro-irrigation techniques are emerging, and advanced analysis methods are helping identify the right products and doses. When done well, nature stays balanced and yields improve. In livestock farming, new techniques ensure that animals are raised in good conditions with automation, reducing costs and increasing yields. As a result, productivity rises, farmers earn more, biodiversity is protected, and the world's population is fed. Many entrepreneurs and major agri-food groups believe technology will save farming. Indeed, many innovative startups have emerged to tackle these issues. Since 2021, agriculture has attracted financial interest. Investment funds are keen on these innovations in startups. In 2022, funding for agricultural innovation rose sharply, showing renewed financial enthusiasm. For instance, the Tikeo Capital Fund, along with Unilever, decided to invest up to 1 billion euros in green agriculture, including 300 billion euros in equity. 2/3 of this will go to companies that are developing solutions like biocontrols, molecules that control agricultural pests ecologically. In France, for example, there are 215 startups in agricultural and food technologies. France leads Europe in fundraising for these fields and is 5th worldwide. Since 2022, AgriTech startups have raised significant funds. Investors are particularly interested in impact companies focused on green agriculture. These innovations and new funding sources could address two major problems in agriculture: lack of resources and a vocational crisis. New agricultural technologies could attract a new, modern generation of farmers, making the profession more appealing and less arduous. However, spreading this innovation on farms takes time, affecting the return on investment. Investors typically expect quick returns, which doesn't always align with the slower pace of agriculture. And in 2023, AgriTech in France attracted 340 million euros, 4.1% of total fundraising for the year, down 28% from 2022. While France remains a dynamic market, investment isn't meeting future challenges in production, food, and environmental impact for a world approaching 10 billion people. Several reasons contribute to this. Technological innovations don't always immediately benefit farmers economically. Long sales cycles and market access controlled by cooperatives or traders limit startups' direct access to farmers. VC struggles with acquisition costs and unit economics in the agricultural value chain, making them hesitant to invest. Currently, AgTech is not creating enough value. To have a strong impact, farmers' incomes would need to increase by at least 20%. However, we are at the beginning, I think, of a gigantic transformation, and there are positive signs, like global investment in AgTech has rocked in 10 years to almost $200 billion. A second generation of entrepreneurs is building on past successes and failures. Major international agri-food groups recognize the need to change intensive agriculture, and scientific advances in biochemistry, biotechnology, robotics, and artificial intelligence, which are essential to the transformation of agriculture, and a better knowledge of the soil microbiota at the heart of tomorrow's agriculture. Those factors should help develop generative agriculture and convince investors to support this transformation.
Outstanding. I think to build on that information, I'd be curious too if everybody else is seeing maybe how some of this regulatory legislation is really maybe impacting AgTech investments based on those across the region. So maybe let's go to Ireland and see what's going on there.
Thanks, Micah. Well, within Ireland, the legislation is predominantly controlled by the European Union. So you have the European Union at the European Council, the Parliament, and the Commission ultimately create the regulation. And then at a local country level, whether it's in Ireland or France or whatever, you have to implement the EU regulations. So one of the key focuses within Europe and certainly within Ireland is around net carbon neutral. And we as a country aim to be net carbon neutral in 2050. That in turn is having particular focuses on agriculture, because agriculture is one of the key industrial carbon creators. And within the Irish government, for example, we have set rules by 2030 that we would have a reduction of 25% in the carbon emissions in the agriculture industry on a base year of 2018. So we would have a lot of the regulations are now converting into actions on the ground for the agriculture and for the farmer to follow. So many of those would be around reduction of fertilizer at farm level. Also how animal slurry is being applied onto the land by using low emissions based applications. We would have a lot of biodiversity initiatives happening, such as growing of hedges, growing of trees, trying to improve the CO2 reduction within the land, within carbon management within the farm level. So a lot of another key area as well, Micah, which is happening here in Ireland. We recently had a national biomethane strategy being produced at a government level, where we're promoting anaerobic digesters, of which agriculture feed, such as grass and slurry, will be a key supplier to the digester to produce methane gas. So again, a lot of these initiatives and investments at farm level are all being controlled by regulations that are being created at EU level.
I could contribute here. So
Please do,
Brazil is
Laura. Thank you.
obviously impacted by all of the world because we do export. So we need to keep up with everybody's regulations. So, it's very interesting what Micheal here has to contribute. But locally in Brazil, so we have a very strong forest regulation. I think it's very different from what is, shared in international media, but we do have a strong legislation. It's very hard to enforce because of the vastness and the size of the country, and because most of this is on the western side of the country, which is kind of like we call it like a frontier kind of region. But we do have a very only 7% of the Brazilian national territory is used for agriculture. We still have 65% of our native forests still maintained. So our legislation is very, very focused on control as well, and aligned with what Micheal is bringing in with respect to, the European directives, but we have to follow like what the US says, what the Asian countries have, because we do actually feed most of the world from here with our commodities.
If I may, in
Please do.
Australia, we have a number of government regulations coming in. There's a climate smart agricultural program for $300 million for sustainability, productivity, and competitiveness, supporting farmers. But as always, we get these great ideas that these are things that are going to happen from a legislation perspective, but there's no great meat to the bone as to actually what it means. And similarly with a future drought fund, Australia obviously gets a lot of droughts over decades, and there's also some biosecurity. We're an island, so we try and keep out diseases. So there's a lot of regulation in terms of what we will import. And then on the other hand, we've also got issues of our government has decided that within the next 5 years, we'll have no live sheep exports to the Middle East or Indonesia or wherever, which of course means that we have to slaughter in Australia, which we're not ready for. We don't have the labour force nor the abattoirs to meet that demand. So there's a lot of investment happening there. And at the same time, I suspect in the future we'll have the same issue with live exports of cattle. So we've got real issues in terms of having enough infrastructure to be able, and I suppose the underpinning of the labour cost to be able to deal with that to make us competitive. So we've got a number of issues coming forward in the next decade.
Brilliant. It's so nice. I think today is World Environment Day. So it's so nice to hear about, we need to protect the environment. But, having said that, I was just, Micheal and Peter and Laura, we're 1.3 billion in the world. India seems to be one of the largest, I think now, the population. So our economy has always been agrarian, and we not only feed our own citizens, but we also export. But that's where, when it comes to AgTech, I was reading one of the very recent reports by some large strategy consulting company. Over the last 3 years, practically post-pandemic, India has been able to garner more than $1.5 billion of fund exclusively for agriculture and agriculture-based startups. So there are like more than 2,000 agriculture-based startups in India. So typically one always sees that technology obviously is much, much larger, but agriculture is also growing. And there are exclusive venture capital funds which are becoming sector specific. So in India also, there are a couple of them which have become very focused on agriculture-based investments they are doing. These are VC funds. So it's nice that the maturity in the industry is also coming in. The more interests which the venture capitalists show in startups, it's good for us, because eventually we are the people who are going to be helping them to hire good quality talent. And it's good for us here in India that, we are engaged extensively in the area of dairy, in the area of which Micheal mentioned, organic food, because organic food is becoming very, very, the consumers are becoming very particular about what they consume now, and the poultry industry also. As Laura mentioned, Brazil is largely plantation driven. So is us. We also grow a lot of coffee, but not as good probably as Brazilian coffee is. Yeah. So
I'll be the judge of that. We'll try some samples later. Yeah, that'd be perfect. Before we switch to the next topic, anybody else have anything they want to summarize from this quickly, and then we'll catch up to the next topic.
I'll just say something real quick, Micah, regarding legislation. here in the U.S. as it relates to pig farming. Some of the large fast food chains a few years ago started getting influenced and misinformed in some cases around how livestock were raised at farm level. And unfortunately, that misinformation led to them to put aggressive pressure on downstream to their suppliers. And that legislation is called Prop 12, which has basically it has to do with square footage per animal in confinement buildings. That has since that pressure has been lessened some, but it had a significant impact because it was adopted first in California and a few other states. And there was some significant investments that producers had to do to accommodate that legislation.
Outstanding. So I think with that wrap up, and obviously if we have some time at the end, if there's some inspiration pops in your head, we can circle back for some final thoughts as well. But I think at this time, we're going to shift to our second topic about emerging talent trends. And really, that's what we deal with every day. So I'll kick off with the first question about any new notable trends or topics that clients that we're working with are looking to explore further and maybe different ones. So if anybody wants to jump in, Eric or Peter, whoever, I'll let raise the hand.
I think a lot of it has to do with what we've been talking about the the technology that's showing up in the fields. And so this knowledge of, how to work with data, how to work with artificial intelligence, I think these are things that we have to start seeking every day more in our candidates. And, to Micheal's contribution about, people are not, we're looking for people outside of like an agricultural background as well. So how do they complement that as well? And and you can't find those two things together that easily today. So these are growing trends with respect to what people are seeking in their own development so that we can start bringing this to the fields.
I think I would add to that. I mean, it's got to be a better balance. We've identified over 100 private equity firms here in the United States that have significant investments in agriculture. That's great. And one side effect of that is sometimes people that don't understand the life cycle of decisions at farm level can be impatient. They can make uninformed decisions, and directly resulting from that, Micah, we've seen it. There has been a overvaluation in recent years of some of the portfolios. And so there's been a valuation reset, and over half the startups in agriculture here in the United States in the last 3 years, they're either didn't make it or they're not going to make it. And so I think private equity firms certainly need to make sure that I think going forward, as a result of some of these bruises, I think going forward, there'll be some much more informed investing, and the investing opportunities that we see. And if people really are participants today really want to seek opportunities, the investing opportunities is precision ag, biological solutions, robotics in terms of harvesting, and analytics and information. We can have the best information available, but if we don't harness it and interpret it in the right way, it's not very useful. So those are a few areas where there's going to be a significant opportunity for investing going forward.
And Mike, I might come in here.
You do.
I think one of the areas that's happening as well is the blurring of the agriculture industry. We'll say maybe a generation ago, it was very clear that something fitted very neatly into agriculture. It did or it did not. Whereas with the emerging changes that are happening, we have more blurring or more integration of agriculture with other industry sectors. So to give you an example, We have a lot of application now of solar, for example, onto farm level, and the investment of solar industry onto farm level. You're also looking at the application mentioned earlier of digesters, anaerobic digesters. So you have a lot more of integration. So are they the energy industry, or is it the agriculture industry? In fact, we have a merging of two industries in this case coming together to provide a solution. So both industries need to collaborate together, and that's where I see more changes happening.
Yeah, it's a wonderful time to see these two worlds coming together and both, I think, benefiting in one way, shape, or form as well. Speaking along those lines, we talked about some of the equity investment and technology emerging and coming together. Do we see that, maybe some ag startups are facing some challenges due to some of the recent overinvestment perhaps, or just the fact that it's such a crazy market in other areas? Monty, what do you see?
There is, so I think startups is an exciting game. Timing is very important. We work extensively with startups because I'm based out of Bangalore, and Bangalore, not only in India but over the world, it's a very favored destination for startups across verticals. So it is combination of a good team, a good idea, and obviously how do you implement that idea? It's great. So in agriculture, obviously it's a very new area of emergence in terms of startups. But very recently, we were doing an assignment for a venture capital fund, and this venture capital fund is exclusively investing in agriculture startups, and they wanted a partner. To my utter surprise, we did a lot of work in India. There are various funds, VCPs, sovereigns, etc. But it found us very difficult to actually identify talent who have done investments only in the agricultural space. But however, we were successful enough in identifying that talent of an Indian origin who was based outside India, and helped that transition, that individual to come into and join this agriculture-based venture capital fund. But yes, some of them, they want to do a lot of disruption, but because agriculture itself has very archaic or old technology methods, so it takes a little time, but again, it depends, So in the supply chain, there is a lot of investments which is happening. We're doing some work in the organic foods industry. We're doing some work in the dairy industry. So I'm fairly bullish that yes, we are on. It's just the early years, and I'm sure, not only as a country in India but all over the world, we are on the threshold of growth and expansion and coming out with new ideas as well.
I see you virtually raised your hand, so let's call on you.
Yeah, one of the private equity firms that we've been working with over the last several months, they've had some success. Traditionally, they had not had significant investments in agriculture, but in the last 2 to 3 years, they've had some success. In doing so, they're expanding their a specific fund for further investments in agriculture. And to go back to what I was saying earlier, to avoid poor decisions in regards to investments and acquisitions, they're asking us to identify ag advisors that could join their organization as a consultant and potential partner within the firm. These would be sector specific. For example, they plan to make some investments in soil and plant health and agronomy. So they're seeking somebody that has a significant background and success in the area of agronomy and plant nutrition and protection. So I think you're going to see a lot more of that, where it's someone can't become an industry expert overnight in agriculture. So I think you're going to see PE firms recruiting more professionals late in their career to help guide their investments in agriculture.
become an overnight expert. Yeah. Laura, your hand's up.
Yeah, I wanted to share, I mean, we saw a very similar trend as Eric mentioned here in Brazil, where there was this over-investing in the agricultural startups and techs. And then a lot of them got a little bit burned in the process. And then so they're becoming a lot more selective. And in the past, we've had a project, and I think this doesn't happen enough maybe with these foreign investments or private equity investments, is evaluating the team of these startups, right? So here locally, at one point, we had a venture capital company that asked us to help them develop a specific assessment for these startup leaders so that they could see like how prepared they were for the role and what were the gaps that they would have to work in these people's development so that they could actually make these businesses grow. Because a lot of them come from like a very technical background, right? They had this, fabulous idea of, I remember this guy that we did this assessment for was technology specific for ricing, for the ricing industry. And, it was a young guy with great, he had the agricultural background. He came from a farming background, family that grew rice and stuff. But, he missed a lot of the leadership skills. So this is another, I would say that this is another trend that we need to look out for, is that, we tend to have a lot of people with a little bit like Micheal said, we had in the past people who just like on the job kind of learning, because they grew up in farms but we don't have a lot of leadership skills developed along this process because people tend to be very technical. And I think this is a piece that, if we look at, and I'll talk about foreign investment, not just about private equity firms, because like, I don't remember who mentioned about, Chinese companies coming in and things like that. So we need people who speak English, which is hard in the farming industry here in Brazil and the agricultural business. But we also need this analysis of, do these people have these leadership skills? If they don't, how do we close that gap, right? And I think that, our industry in the executive search and leadership services, we can support also these companies with this kind of analysis.
Yeah.
Before the investment.
What we're finding in Australia is, and I suspect this is happening worldwide, is when you get venture capitalists or private equity who are investing in ag, whether it's existing or startups, that the issue is, as always, that it's a very capital intensive business in agriculture, and it's a matter of whether the VC or the PEs have enough patience to look at a long-term investment rather than the short-term, let's go 5 years and get out and make a lot of money. So I think that's a real trap for some organisations. And I think from a talent acquisition point of view, we're seeing once again in Australia with universities and TAFE colleges that they're really changing their curriculum to really get more involved with the AgTech side of things. So that's actually appealing to some people who may have not had a traditional agricultural background and see that this is, they can use their technological skills to get involved in the industry. But as Laura says, they've got to then learn the leadership side of things as well, which comes with experience and time, of course.
Andy, I think this will be the last question for the, oh, sorry, Micheal, I did not see your hand up. Good, sir. Go ahead.
No problem, Micah. Again, just building upon the earlier points, I think, again, is going back to this, the blurring of the agriculture and having to have the need to bring in new skills into agriculture. Again, if we take technology in the perspective of IT, so there's many fantastic IT firms out there who are creating solutions for AgTech, but unless there's the convergence of bringing together these two industries, tech will not be successful in agriculture, or agriculture will not be successful in tech. It's, as Eric outlined, we have to bring these together and to be able to share that knowledge. And I think that's really one of the key challenges for the industry going forward, to really raise the bar and to bring greater efficiency into the industry on a global basis.
I think that's an interesting challenge that we get a chance to tackle as we keep moving forward. One housekeeping note for people that are watching and asking questions, please continue to do so. We will circle those at the end of the session. So feel free to ask away and take advantage of that. And so I think, like I said earlier, the last question for this segment is going to focus on succession planning and how people are addressing that and how that's impacting talent acquisition as well. Eric, did you have any initial thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was mentioned earlier. Maybe Peter was highlighting that, but here in the States, we've had several projects that we have that's come to us from family-owned farming operations, where the family members were either not interested or they weren't capable of taking the reins from father or grandfather or grandmother or mother, and they've had to lean on external non-family members to come in and play CEO or COO in many operations. And so um, we're fortunate here in the United States to where there are a significant number of family-owned operations in farming and agriculture, and but the interesting trend here is younger generations may not have the interest or the desire or the ability to take the reins to allow mom and dad to enjoy a bit of retirement. And so there's some interesting trends there.
Anybody else feel like jumping on that? All at once? Maybe twice?
I'll just come in on that one, Micah. I think from an Irish context, one of the observations around succession that I would notice is that in the past, the family farm was often a way of life, whereas that it's moving away from being a way of life to become a business enterprise. And with that brings a different skill set challenge for succession. And I probably would be noticing farms are becoming larger in order to ensure the success of the enterprise from a revenue perspective, from a profitability perspective, and that there's more farms are moving away from a sole trader setup to a corporate entity setup, and that they really are being ran much more like a business as they should be, focusing on revenues, on cost management, on profitability. So I think succession now requires business skill set in addition to agricultural skill sets and knowledge as well. And I think that that's becoming an important part in the succession mix of identifying the next talent generation, particularly for the family farm level. It was always there at a business, at some of the companies that Eric was mentioning, larger organizations, but at the family farm level, it is really changing into very much running as an operation and requiring those skill sets of business competencies.
Yeah, and one last thing on that, we see a lot of a significant number of family-owned operations that's formed a board of directors with external family members being a part to help influence succession planning and the sustainability and the future of the farm.
Laura, I see your hand up.
Yeah, so here Brazil is a very family-owned business still. We still see a lot of succession going on within the family, but I think what Micheal said, these newer generations are seeking their business degrees. So they're going off to the States even to get their MBAs and things like that, really to improve there. And another point to what Eric was saying, I think also is some of them are doing IPOs. And they are seeking to bring into their board of directors people that are from like large multinationals. So we have like a client who's brought people from like Monsanto, well, not Monsanto anymore, but Bayer, bringing them from significant experience from multinationals that will bring this knowledge to them through the board, right? And help bring in like team people to their teams who like maybe they're not that many, but there's one or the other year that will have had that, more of a stronger business background or having worked with multinationals going into the local Brazilian companies that are family owned.
Interesting.
I think it's similar in India also, because the first generation does farming, and as Micheal and Laura also mentioned, the second generation, gets that degree international and tries to corporatize. And when you want to corporatize an organization into, as Micheal mentioned about, into a business enterprise, then they start a lot of new innovation in R&D, in packaging, and then they want to convert it into a directly from a B2B environment to a B2C environment also. And then if you have to export, then there are certain global standards. So then quality parameters also become extremely important. That's why world over your products will be I would say imported and also respected. But yes, one sees a slight change, and where also Laura mentioned that there is a large scale, and even Eric highlighted that of independent directors on the board to run this entire effort from the top. So very similar in India also, I would say that.
Laura, one more.
Just one more thing,
No.
I forgot to mention is that another thing that we have also in Brazil is that we have very, very large farms and very, very small farms. So the very small farms, they're moving into co-ops, right? Cooperative situations where they can use these channels to distribute their products. And what we've seen as a trend is that in the head of the head of the cooperative, right? So it's like a structure where you have these members of these farms, they're part of the cooperative, they're seeking help from executive search and leadership firms to help support the development of their teams. So we have been recently called also to do a lot of assessments for the heads of these cooperatives, for like the small farms and things like that, to help them develop also their, business skills. So that's also a different trend that we're having, because of the way that the Brazilian agricultural market is structured.
Very, very, that's fascinating actually, to think about how that's transitioning and shifting, and different skill sets are being evaluated to bring all that together. I think that's really interesting. Any final thoughts real quick before we jump to the next session? I think this has been a really fun segment for me. The case, outstanding. Thank you. Kacey, I'm going to turn this next segment over to you to rock and roll and enjoy.
Perfect. Thanks, Micah. So I think to round out these segments, we're going to focus on a fun question and then audience Q&A. So I see one question that's popped into the question and answer, but if there's others, now is a good time to add those. So just a fun question for anyone. What new technology in the ag field are you most excited about to see implemented in our industry? And Micheal, do you want to go ahead?
Thanks, Kacey. I think one of the new areas that I see happening, which personally I think is really, really interesting, I think it's kind of a game changer really, is the application of IVF technology to produce the embryos of high genetic merit for both female and female calves. Basically, in the breeding industry, really what this can do is it can speed up or fasten the generic gain with a focus on both feed efficiency, but also the methane emissions or the methane outputs. So if we go back again to carbon footprint, we talk about sustainability. One of the key challenges for agriculture at animal level is the emissions of methane emissions from the farm animal. So if you're able to have a breeding program which is able to breed animals with lower methane output over their life, it can have a huge impact on meeting a sustainability goal. So that's one aspect. But the other aspect then is around feed efficiency. So again, if you're able to have an animal, so if it's a beef animal, and you're able to produce that animal, so the animal can be slaughtered maybe 1 month or 2 months earlier than what would normally be. And if you multiply that over the animals in the world, the impact that that can have on achieving emission goals is very, very significant. In addition then to the IVF application in breeding, a similar what's happening in Ireland at the moment is the whole area of genotyping, and we have a national genotyping program. So essentially, each calf, when the calf is born, the parent of both the cow and the bull will be noted. So the generic merit of that calf can be traced back all the way. So there's full traceability. And also around breeding, there's a lot of activity happening, very much being driven from the US. It's really making its way into Europe and other parts of the world, into Asia, etc. Is the whole concept of sex semen, which is particularly being managed very well from a company, ST Technologies in the US, and they're really driving this area and this application, again, having a very important focus on the breeding industry, along with dairy beef programs and greater indices around breeding. So from my perspective, that would be my area of interest watching, is the whole area of breeding and where breeding is going and how breeding improvements are helping to achieve sustainability goals at a country level, at a regional level, i.e. within Europe, but more importantly also at a global level.
Absolutely. Those genetic decisions and the breeding technology, that's very important to our industry. And we've come a long way too, just in the last 10, 15 years. So that's a good one to call out. Are there any others that everyone's excited about?
Kacey, our team has, as you know, we have several projects going on, recruitment projects for a vaccine manufacturer. And this was just interesting. We all know what a vital role the honeybee plays in our cycle within agriculture and our gardens at home and flowers. But they actually have a honeybee vaccine that they utilize. And I just thought that was interesting. It wasn't the largest product line that they have, but that was a unique concept to me.
Absolutely.
Kacey, it's not a new concept, but cell grazing, I have seen, particularly in our southern states, how well that is going in terms of particularly larger farms where our clients are able to put a number of cattle onto a certain paddock. They only let them graze for one day. They then move into the next paddock. They are measuring how much has been eaten, how much grass is required to put on a certain amount of kilos, and then they rest the paddock for another month. And it's very scientific, but they do it and they move them daily. And it's quite interesting to see what they can do, and they know exactly, they can map how it's being productive.
Anyone else have anything else to add, or we'll move on to the Q&A from the audience? All right. Well, first question from the audience is, what impact is lab-grown meat having on the ag space, if any at all?
I think the one thing right now with that is it's pretty capital intensive to do. And so the economics, I mean, there was a lab-grown fish that an investment company had put significant investments in, but a 4-ounce piece will cost $80 to produce. And so I think until the economies of scale comes into play, I think it has a place in the food chain going forward as we meet the growing demand for food globally. But the economics, it's going to take a bit of time for the economics to come in balance.
I'll actually jump in here as well too. I think if anything, it's probably going to help accelerate the use of genomics that Micheal was talking about to improve the efficiencies and help pressure that, I guess, if you will. Competition's always good in one way, shape, or form, I think. So I think it's going to help incentivize other areas as well. And so I think genomics, I've always said, makes better choices sooner, and so I think it helps parallel with that. And so I'm intrigued to see how they both parallel and play out.
Yeah, I think parallel is a good term, Micah, because I don't think one's ever going to replace the other, but they might work in parallels together within the industry. So that's a good point. Anyone else have anything to add there? We'll move on to the next one. All right. Well, Joe has a good question here. Are farmers as excited about AI as ag tech firms and investors are? And we can even open that up to just ag tech in general. What are you seeing?
I would say yes. I mean, I think, excuse me, as we mentioned, there's a bigger focus now on cost. And, because most of these, at least for Brazil, where we were very commodity oriented, so cost is a big issue. And so all the technology, it comes in to support that the operation in itself, because most of this technology is focused on the operation, is to bring the cost down, right? And also with the precision technology as well, so that you're not, that you're applying, for example, your pest control exactly where you need it, and not on all of the plantation or things like that. So I would say, I've seen that our clients, they use it. I mean, they're early adopters even, I would say, with respect to technology. Anything they can try out, they're going to try it out as soon as they can. I think there's a tendency for that in general, at least in Brazil.
Go ahead, Micheal.
Thank you. I would think the adoption of the technology and who's really interested to a degree, it's a generational thing. It's a bit like most industries. So I would say the younger generation are really embracing technology because they grew up with that technology from the very moment. Often they're maybe more educated as well in technology in sense of apps. They were born with an app and a phone, so they're more comfortable with the technologies. They're more embracing of the technologies. I would probably say the more developed the enterprise is, the more likely it is to apply the technologies and to be excited about new technologies. But equally, I see a little bit like what Laura was mentioning about co-ops and cooperatives. I definitely see more opportunities for cooperatives, maybe to be the conduit of using technology. So they're the ones who are bringing the technologies and helping the learning to the farmer at the farm level. So they're passing on the knowledge, they're embracing the technologies, and they're educating by putting training programs in place, by putting developmental programs in place for their farm members to understand the technology and explaining how technology can help at a farm level meet whether it's efficiency or meet carbon footprint goals. So basically helping the farm to achieve its KPIs using technology. So I think it's very, very much there.
I think one thing, Kacey, that we saw here in the States, and we all know who this company is, but I won't say the name, but it's one of the largest farm equipment manufacturers in the world. To address what Micheal said on generation, they carried out a social media strategy and campaign, if you like, to announce that they were employing a CTO. And this CTO stands for Chief Tractor Officer. And they were only going to hire somebody that was a millennial and put them in that position so that they could help the organization relate to the end user, the younger generation. I thought that was pretty cool.
That was neat. We have a couple new questions in the chat. So this one from Yatin, just if someone's considering getting into the agriculture industry, the subsidies given by the government are pretty low. So I guess just advice for someone to be able to get into the agriculture industry and then sustain, just as technology is changing, that means expense as well. So what advice do you have for them?
I would say here in the States, and globally, really, a good starting point would go to a local university that has a significant agriculture program. Through the university extension or that particular college, they would be both interested and capable in advising an individual that wanted to enter the space.
Adding to that, Eric, what you said, even here in India, we see a lot of academic industry collaboration happening. And this academia industry collaboration is also leading to a new genre of agri incubators. So if you are keen on getting into agriculture sector, I would also advise that a fair amount of subject matter expertise, seed funding, whatever one needs to do, please get attached to something like that. And both from the industry as well as from the academic circle, And with the subsidies, even the government also supports that. So one would be able to make a kickstart in that year.
Cal?
I see certainly here in Ireland, I'm sure it's happening in other countries as well. But if we look at a generational challenge where you may have somebody who's at, say, a later stage career, they're really looking at the next generation, but there's no family members we mentioned available, or the family simply aren't enthusiastic about joining the family farm, etc. That there are programs where you can align somebody who's interested in agriculture and matching their skills with somebody who's maybe later stage career. So one of the challenges around agriculture, we mentioned earlier, is it is quite capital intensive. So if you're going out buying a large hectare farm, you need a lot of capital behind you to be able to purchase the land. You need capital behind you to invest in maybe a dairy enterprise. So it's quite a capital intensive industry to break into, because most people enter into the farm from a generational perspective. It's handed down. But if you're interested in agriculture, you're not from a family farm. Well, how do you get in the first place? So I think one of the areas where you can try to break in, if you're a younger stage career, you're starting off in agriculture, is to maybe try and match with somebody who is later stage career and who's looking at succession, and that it's done over a planned way. So maybe the farmer at later stage career, he or she is investing, they're putting the land into the enterprise. It's like a partnership basis. Whereas maybe the younger person coming in, well, he or she is investing their labor, they're investing their youth, they're investing themselves into the farm, and that a partnership basis can happen, that then succession can happen so the farmer can see, like a probation, is this person the right person for the farm? Have they got the right work ethic, the right skill sets, the right competencies? And often some very successful partnerships can really grow and develop by allowing this young person to come in, gain the experience. The farmer is the mentor and coach of this young person, and a natural succession place can happen in a very successful and in a planned way.
Well said.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Yes, well said. We only have time for one more question. And just before I ask that, we were getting feedback from the audience that in addition to ST Genetics, Genus ABS is also providing sex semen, and perhaps there are others working towards that as well. So just a quick clarification there. But just last question, and a good one too. What specific areas of usage of AI in agriculture are you seeing fastest growth? Is it breeding and genomics, or are there other areas where you are seeing growth there?
I would say at the crop level, in the U.S., that's where we're seeing the biggest uptake.
Anybody else have any closing comments before we wrap up today?
Sorry, I was gonna help answer this last question. I was gonna mention crop protection because of the sustainability trend. So with all the bio options that people are looking into, a lot of the startups are looking into that as well. So.
All right. Well, as we wrap up today's discussion, I want to thank our panelists again, participants and organizers, for a successful first Industry Uncovered webinar. And for those of you interested in diving deeper into today's topics, check out the Industry Uncovered podcast on Apple, YouTube, and Spotify. And you can also visit the Charles Aris blog and subscribe to the Charles Aris Agriculture newsletter for monthly insights on all things agriculture. So thank you again, and we'll see you next time.